Today we're discussing Queen's Shadow by E.K. Johnston. And don't forget to stick around until the end when the author herself will answer some of your questions about the novel. The Star Wars Show Book Club is a series where we gather friends and fans to read Star Wars books, examining how they relate to all of the Star Wars films, live-action shows, animated series, comics, and games. Through these stories, we enrich our understanding of the galaxy far, far away. Hello friends, Kristen Baver here, ready to host another book club call with a few new friends. Our story begins just at the end of the Battle of Naboo in Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, and takes us through the end of Queen Padme Amidala's reign and the beginning of her time as a galactic senator. While the events in the book take place years before Star Wars: Attack of the Clones, the story includes all of her royal handmaidens, including Sabe, Rabe, Sashay, Yane, and Erte, and the crew that replaced them, including Corday, Dorme, and Verse. But more than a handmaiden's tale, the book gives us a glimpse at the seeds of unrest that gave birth to the rebellion, showcasing how Bail Organa and Mon Mothma worked together to create the Rebel Alliance we see in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story and throughout the original trilogy. Plus, there's political intrigue, spying, and some gorgeous dresses that double as body armor. Now let's meet our book club crew. Today we have DJ, Senior Social Engagement Strategist for StarWars.com, Amy, who's a contributing writer for StarWars.com, as well as James, who's also a contributing writer for StarWars.com. What do you guys think of the book?
I really like seeing a window of Padme between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and I really enjoyed reading all about the extensive hair and makeup routines her and the handmaidens have to go through.
Got a lot of tips there, did you?
I need them, yeah.
I really like the way that Sabe and Padme interact, and then they go, on separate missions. But I really love their relationship and the relationships they have with the other characters.
I think it was worth the wait for all the Padme fans out there who've been wanting to, get more of her backstory. I think if you didn't hate the Trade Federation, you'll hate them a lot more too after this. My detest for the Trade Federation definitely increased.
I love that as a tagline for this book. If you didn't hate the Trade Federation before, you're gonna really hate them now. Although no one can say Trade Federation for some reason.
Yeah, clearly I can't. But
I couldn't either. I messed up the line. It's okay.
A communication disruption can only mean one thing.
So first things first, after spending some more time with the handmaidens, I'm curious who your favorite was by the end of this book.
I really liked how they expanded Sabe's role and how that she kind of got feistier towards it and became more of a strong character.
I liked Sabe kind of for different reasons. I felt like I could connect with her a lot, being there trying to be the person that just makes everything happen in the background and immediately gets a command and immediately says, okay, I'm going to come up with plans to do this, get it done. But I think my favorite though was actually Verse, the slicer, and just she'd find out all kinds of cool information.
She was so resourceful. I loved her.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to say Sabe because she was such a huge part of this book. And she had her own kind of storylines where she wasn't always, with Padme. But I thought what was really interesting is how it talked about how she was basically chose a role where she was living in the shadow of this very powerful woman.
Queen Shadow takes on a lot of different meanings throughout the story, I think, and I want to touch upon a few of them. And I'm curious to see, if you guys caught some that maybe didn't quite register for me, or maybe I didn't see them in quite that same light. But, the first one I think is the most obvious one, right from the beginning. Padme is in the shadow, literally, of her reign as queen, and she's trying to emerge as her own person, and she's trying to figure out politically what it means for her to be a senator now.
I think that, especially talking about Sabe as the queen's literal shadow, that she was always with Amidala as queen, and she is always there to just step in and sort of be Padme too whenever needed, and so this is her chance to finally break out of that.
I think all the handmaidens in a way are living in the queen's shadow. They do it with honor, like they're changing their names to honor her, because it always seemed kind of unlikely that their names would be so similar.
That's why they were hired.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, you got an accent on the E? Come on in.
We were looking at your resume and it doesn't matter.
In the movies, they were really living in the shadows. They were hooded, like you couldn't see them. They were intentionally hiding. And then in this book, they really kind of got to come out of that shadow.
When Amidala goes to the Senate, there is the shadow of when Queen Amidala presented in front of the Senate 10 years ago, and that casts a pretty long shadow. A lot of people had their impression of her set then when she basically flipped the whole table over on the Senate and saying, hey, you guys need a new chancellor just because this one that you have isn't listening to me right now.
One more shadow I thought about, but kind of the shadowy figure threatening everything that she holds dear. And of course, we know the ultimate shadowy figure is Palpatine and his machinations and everything that he's trying to do.
Well, I think it's also her learning who to trust, and I feel that's interesting where everybody's in the shadows. There's heroes on every side. Mon Mothma and Bail Organa are in the shadows, but they're doing it for the good.
Because we know where the story leads for both Padme and for Palpatine, I'm wondering, why do you think she included those little tidbits about Palpatine and expand on what Padme thinks about Palpatine during this time frame?
I think it was important for them to show the relationship that had shifted between Palpatine as like the nice Uncle Palpatine that he was in The Phantom Menace, to him going like, this kid over here.
Yeah, I think that at the beginning when he tries to get on the transportation committee and kind of gets a little smacked down, like she wasn't expecting that. And, she realizes that, there are bigger machinations in play, and just the fact that she's grown in her own stature and power and feels more comfortable in the senator's clothes, so to speak, that she can reevaluate her relationship with Uncle Sheev.
Oh man, that was a great segue too, because I want to talk about the clothes and the makeup and the hair, and I know DJ's dying to talk about all of those things. One of the things I loved about Queen Shadow was that it gave you more of a reason for that. Was there anything that was explained more in the story, in that realm that made you think about Padme on film in a different way or in a fresh light?
One thing I definitely thought was really interesting was how the rest of the galaxy kind of looks upon Naboo, or what they think of the planet. I think it kind of hurt Padme's reputation at first, where they already thought she was too young of a senator, but now she's just kind of an ornament.
There was a lot of people underestimating her because she was young, because she was queen, because she was a woman. And, understanding that, she wasn't doing these things just for fun, everything had a bigger reason behind it.
But I think one of the things that the book also really excels at is expanding on some characters that we see mostly in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the animated series. The book gives you the backstory on her relationship with Clovis. When I read that bit towards the end with her and Clovis, I actually made a note in my little note file I was keeping that just said, "Clovis, you cad." That was it. That's all the note said. But you also get Bail Organa, you get more Mina Bonteri, you get more Mon Mothma, who I love.
Looking at some of the senators we see during the Clone Wars, and especially that relationship and how it starts off with Bail Organa, that you're like, this is how they start off. This is kind of weird. He's basically lurking in the shadows during an attempt on her life.
What's he doing?
Exactly, what's he doing? And but I really loved seeing how Mina Bonteri weaves in, and Clovis and Mon Mothma, and how it's they're all playing this game.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for anything that shows kind of the seedlings of the rebellion. So to see that, when she's talking about Padme's talking about different factions of the Senate, and she's trying to figure out which one to join.
Yeah, and it was something interesting to learn, because since there is such a giant time gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and you see her being a strong queen to being a strong senator, you just assume she was like that the whole way. And in this book, really kind of showed that wasn't the case at all. She went from being a queen of a planet, the youngest queen, which was really respectable on Naboo, to being a very young senator, which was almost embarrassing. It made her look bad.
But knowing that Sabe was kind of in her life that entire time, really, I thought was really great, because their relationship is kind of unlike any other relationship with the Handmaiden. It really is almost like, another sister for her. And so that to me was the most moving part of it, just because, really, so much time goes on between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And I think that this book really kind of drives home that, she was doing a lot of really good work during this time, but, her life was threatened also for most of this time. And she never really got a break. She never got a break from that.
But I loved the symmetry between the first chapter, where she's, laying in the water, and it's actually quite a peaceful moment for her, and then the epilogue where she's laying in her coffin and it's much less peaceful. I think that's everything. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for reading the book, I think, in a week again, and joining us for the call. It was a really great discussion, and I super appreciate all of your time. And now we're joined by E.K. Johnston. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem. It's great to be here.
So excited. We're going to dive into some really great questions from some of our readers.
Can't wait.
At Serena Reeds writes, where did you find inspiration for developing the personalities of Sabe and the rest of the handmaidens? Also, what did you do to get into the headspace of Padme to write her voice so perfectly? I love this book and Padme so much.
Thank you. Getting into their headspaces was definitely the most difficult part because there's so many of them and you meet them all at the same time. Basically, I wrote down what I wanted all of them to do as part of the whole. So as part of the handmaiden group, what each of their function would be. And then I kind of worked backwards from there. So Sashay, I knew she was going to go into politics. So I made her kind of the observer. And then I thought about what would it be like to be a 12-year-old observer and how would you change over 4 years?
Conja Chris is wondering, how difficult was it to give each handmaiden their own unique voice?
From a starting point, it was a bit of a challenge. I tend to write very small casts of characters. You've noticed in the Ahsoka book, for example, there's really just Ahsoka and Kaden. They're the two main voices, and like the bad guys show up sometimes and cause trouble. So writing this kind of like massive ensemble straight out of the gate was new for me. It was a big challenge. So I literally wrote down everybody's names and everybody's like defining character traits and how I felt like they would talk.
At Nikki T writes, I particularly loved Sabe's characterization in Queen's Shadow. What was the author's reaction to her recent appearance in the Darth Vader comic after the events of the book?
So in this case, I woke up to like 40 messages on Twitter that were like, hey, E.K. Johnston, have you seen the new Darth Vader? And I was like, no, why would I have seen the new Darth? Oh, okay, I guess I should go find the new Darth Vader. So I read the first two and then I was like, are there any more? And I gotta tell you, I streamed the whole way through the third one.
At Solo ASW Story writes, which pre-existing character were you most excited to explore besides Padme herself in this book?
It was really fun to write Bail at this point in his career. I mean, I got to write him sort of at the beginning of the rebellion. I guess it's right before he just starts his descent into cynicism. And
That's a great way to phrase it.
And of course, always and forever, Palpatine. He was so much fun to just like, to write him saying something and like, he's like, oh, I'm sure I'll do everything I can. And you're like, no, you won't. You will in fact do the exact opposite of that. So that kind of thing for me is always extra fun.
And Jason Powell writes in with more of a comment than a question, but we'll allow it. I love Sabe calling R2 a little blue snitch. Also love the cameo by Dex's Diner. Which makes me wonder, what other fun details did you write into this book?
I think my personal favorite is when Sabe is leaving and there's a boy who stops her and holds the door open for her. I had really wanted to put Kanan into this book somehow, which is why Diva Balada ended up in it. But then I did the math and realized that I couldn't use Kanan. So that little boy is definitely someone who will show up later in Star Wars. And so far, only 2 people have noticed.
Oh, all right. So that gets us through all of the reader questions, but I also did want to just open up and chat a little bit about Queen's Peril. In so much as I know you probably can't say that much yet, even though we're so close to it being out. What can you tell us about Queen's Peril for people who are watching along and have just read Queen's Shadow? What can you tell us about the sequel that's a prequel?
The sequel that's a prequel. I've been describing it thusly because Star Wars is a gigantic ball of causality. I do recommend that you read Queen's Shadow first, which presumably if you're here you have. But Queen's Peril takes place starting the day of Padme's election to Queen of Naboo and ends about 3 days after Qui-Gon Jinn's funeral.
And I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you going to break my heart again with Qui-Gon Jinn?
Yeah.
Why?
Of course. He's always one of my favorites to write. I love writing him so much. And I only got to like kind of poke at him in Queen's Shadow. But in Queen's Peril, he gets to have actual scenes. So it was definitely fun.
All right, that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for joining us, EK.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to all of you who joined us from home, sent in your questions, and watched along today. Come back in 2 weeks when the Star Wars Show Book Club returns to dig into Resistance Reborn by Rebecca Rowanhorse. And don't forget to tweet your questions. This time we'll be using hashtag SWSBCReborn, and we'll ask them on the show. Until then, may the Force be with you.